Well, it's time. Now here's what we got. What I'm using here, I told you we're gonna do a base dye. Now I don't have to dye everything, just basically the exterior parts where we're going to be wearing through. And again, this is going to be the very base color. So what I've got is a General Finishes medium brown dye. And again, I'm doing the carcass, drawer front, top, and the doors. Again, anything that's going to get worn through. Now, when you're dyeing something, a dye is different than a stain. A dye is pretty much absorbed into the wood, becomes part of it. They're very strong. Dyes can give you lap marks and whatever because they dry very fast. A water-based dye does a whole lot better on that. But again, one of the ways to handle a dye is just to get a good wet coat as quickly as possible. The best way to dye something is spraying it. But if you're having to wipe it, one of the best tools I've ever found is just a stain pad. Now, before I get into this, let me show you something. What we've done is we sanded everything a little bit, came back, put our pegs in, cut them off about 1/8 of an inch, and then just took some 220 and went over them just enough to dull the edges, but also to leave them proud. So all of our pegs are in and they're proud. Now again, when you're dyeing something, go fast. You want to get this as wet as you can, as fast as you can. Unlike a stain, one coat of a dye does one thing, another coat does something else. Now you'll notice I'm not too worried right now about the perimeter. See where I got a run here? With that said, the two coats, if you get drips and runs, they're going to show. That's why you want to do it very quickly. So what you want to do is get a coat on everything. Then come back and address your other areas. Again, as fast as possible and wet. The way to control color with the dye is simply put is saturation. Get it wet and get it quick. And what you're going to want to do is, again, get it all wiped. Take a clean cloth, come back, wipe it back, and you're going to have it. But in this case, all we're after is simply put is a base color. That's all I want. Once you have a coat of dye on everything, it's not gonna, and it's still wet, it's not gonna, you're not gonna have the issue. If you're looking for me to do this neatly, don't. I just want to get it on, get it wet. All right. I forgot to get a cloth to wipe it back. Let me grab one. Now, while we're talking about this, now one of the things with the dye, this is a water base. Water bases don't dry as fast as a alcohol base. And I don't care for oil-based dyes no matter what. But here's the thing. Before I get chastised too hard as we go through this about respirators and all that, we're using water-based, but that doesn't mean they have chemicals in there too. And you want a good OSHA and NIOSHA approved respirator no matter what you're working with. Now in here, I'm gonna have a dust mask basically, but it's a really good one. But up here, what you can't see, or maybe you can, It's what's called a big air exchange. And this pumps a ton of air in. Over here, we have a big exhaust fan pulling it out, which you can't see. So we've got like a hurricane of wind going through here. Now, that said, it's very difficult to talk to you with a big respirator on. But we're set up to help handle that. So as we go through, just know that. Okay, I've got the other door to do, and the top, and then everything is dyed. Now once we've dyed it, again, this is a water base. There's going to be a little bit of green raising. So once it's dyed, we'll let that dry good. We're going to come back and give everything a light coat of shellac just to seal it. Again, the reason for the shellac is so that it gives us something to scuff sand. We're going to take a 320 sandpaper sanding sponge, and we're simply going to sand a little bit after the shellac. That gets all the fuzzies and gives us a nice, clean, smooth surface. Then we're going to look at some paint. Now you're also going to see us sweating in here. It's hot back here, really hot. So I'm going to get this dyed, and we'll be back. Got your apron on? You ready to paint? Want some gloves?
Maybe.
I thought maybe. All right. First, let's talk about what we've got here. Now, we've got the dye, and we've got shellac on it. Now, I sprayed it, but we'll talk about that. If you can't feel this on camera, but you can listen. It's rough. It feels about like a...
Sandpaper.
Huh?
Sandpaper.
Yeah, it feels about like a 120 grit sandpaper. Now, you can just use a regular sandpaper, but this is a sterrated. These are called Rhinosoft, and I'm not doing a commercial for these. We just use them constant. There's nothing easier to do. We call it scuff sanding, mid-coat sanding, whatever you want to call it. And this is one of those things that people don't like to do. You know, I see people go out here and they'll sand wood to, 320 or 1,000 grit, and then they wonder why they can't get a smooth finish. Well, the reason is anytime any liquid goes on wood, it's going to raise the grain. It's going to raise some fiber. And this is poplar, and we put a water-based dye on it, and you can bet it's going to raise, it's going to fuzz it. That's what you're hearing. Now, I want to talk about the shellac a minute. What we used is a product called Seal Coat. Now, you can buy it at the box stores. It's what's called a 2-pound cut. That means we talked about that. It's a pound of shellac and a gallon of alcohol. But we don't need it that heavy. So what we did is we cut it to a 1-pound cut, meaning we added equal amount of denatured alcohol. The other thing with getting a good painted finish is having the right tools. If you're going to use a brush, in this case we're using a solvent base. Shellac is alcohol base. This is a natural hair brush. But you ever washed your hair and well, look, you get these little frizzies out here. Well, guess what? When you use it with a water-based material, you're going to get the same thing in the brush. So if you're using an oil-based, salt, alcohol-based, anything, you want to use a natural hair brush. If you're using water-based, you want to use a synthetic brush. The nylons, but you want a good brush. Don't go buy the cheapest thing out there. It's a huge difference. But to put a shellac on, what you want to do, anytime you're painting anything, you want to maintain a wet edge. Shellac dries very fast, so work quickly. You can also wipe it. Then you do what's called tip it off. And you do that. What tipping off means is that you simply take the tip of the brush and you do it. You just lightly go over it, but you got to do it before it dries. That's called tipping off, and that's how you get the best brushed finish. When you're brushing something, you don't get on here with a brush and just start slopping paint. That's not going to work. So let's look at it. Okay, we got to sand some. Now, this is a mid-coat sanding. And in reality, with that 1 pound cut of shellac, it's not much more than a wipe. Just wipe it. And you can immediately, now that's end grain, and that's typically very rough. Feel that. See, because what it's done, the shellac and the dye has raised the fiber in the wood, hardened it, and now the sandpaper is going to cut it off. Now, I was telling you about these pads. Again, I have no affiliation. Woodcraft also has one by Merca. I think it's called Merca Gold. You can go, this is by, we get ours from a company called Industrial Abrasives, and it's industrialabrasives.com. These are not super expensive. But because they're like a sponge, I mean, you can, and they just keep on cutting. Now listen, you don't hear all that grit. And you can go in any direction because you're not sanding wood, you're sanding a finish. All right, you know what? Let's get that damp. We just need to clean this off good, please. All right, another thing that we use constant. These are called painter's pyramids. And what this allows us to do is do one side, flip it, do the other side. So all I'm going to do is take a damp cloth, wipe it off, get the dust and stuff off of it. And I'm going to do the other side because I don't want to have to mess with it with wet paint on the other side. You know, there's two ways of building a finish. Notice I said building. That's exactly how you finish something. You build a finish. You don't just smear it on there and hope for the best. You have to work a finish. You got to take your time and you got to be patient. Now, if you're not able to take your time and be patient, you need to learn to spray. I know how to do that. Been doing it a while. All right, let's start. Now the color the green, here's your gloves. The green is sage green. And it's General Finishes milk paint. And it just does a really nice job. It's expensive, but it does a really nice job. Now, here's some good tools for using on water base. Foam brush. Again, a synthetic brush, and these are great, especially, it's just one of them painting pads, especially for flat surfaces, like this top. Almost like the TV commercial. Just get a light coat on. And again, just like that brush, what you want to do is tip it off. Now here's a key. Do the edges first. Get all your edges before you do anything. And again, what I'm doing is I'm tipping it off. I just want to lay down a nice, smooth coat. If it doesn't cover on one coat, that's quite all right. I don't want it to. The object of the game is to get a good finish, is to get a good protective coating that has good depth, has good body, and as little amount of finish as possible. That's the ticket. All right. Now I'm going to go ahead and do the second one here. Because, again, now you notice what we're doing. There's a rule. Let the center take care of itself, meaning you want to brush something like an airplane landing. You don't want to start and come in from an edge. Why? Because when you do that, that's when you get all them ugly spots. Runs and all that stuff. So, again, and you want to keep that wet edge. Just like an airplane landing, just sweeping in. Same thing with a brush. You ready to paint? Now, she's excellent at painting flowers and florals and all of them things, and I got a bunch of it around here somewhere. You could put any of them on here? You don't think so? Okay. All right. Paint. And that's a paper plate, and those are good for these because oftentimes I'll use the plastic ones. I didn't have any, so I sprayed that paper plate with a coat of shellac so the paper wouldn't soak it up. Hey, that stuff cures a lot of ills. There you go. Now, gently, now you look good. And what you want to do, again, is that little tip-off thing is just kind of look across it and make sure you don't have any heavy buildup anywhere. Yeah. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to mid-coat sand this once it's dry. Now, I'm going to let this set up a little bit, then we'll flip it over and do the other side. Now we'll actually sand this again, that same 320, just to make sure it's smooth prior to putting the white on. Now on this pie safe, the inside of it and everything's just going to be white, right? And the color we're using is Snow White. It's white. And then we're going to do a little glaze to kind of antique it a little bit, but we're not going to get to beat it up or nothing.
A few sand throughs. So that the
Sand through ain't beating it up.
No, we're not throwing it outside and dragging the kids around like we did when they were little.
You know, that brings up a point. And I think I told you this. When you're, one of the best ways in the world to distress something like a door, and I think I already told you, top, is get some asphalt that's got a little bit of gravel on it and just lay it down and walk on it. Don't stomp it and break the door and all, just kind of walk on it and work the gravel and whatever, let them do the denting and nicking. And the reason for that is it does it randomly, so you don't have a pattern. One of the biggest problems people have trying to distress something and make it look old is they just get on there and beat the dickens out of it. And that's not what you want. And when you're doing something, it's just like this pie safe, you got to think about it. Where would it have worn? Okay, we've got a lift top, so people would have taken their hands and they would have pushed up on the top. The knobs, around the knobs, obviously. Okay, yeah, so your front edge. Back corner? Nope. You know, you got back legs? Not so much. Bottoms of the front legs? Oh yeah. You know, feet hitting them, cleaning, whatever, they get, you know, dinged up. So you just got to think about that a little bit of how it would have occurred and try to replicate that. You don't just beat the whole thing up. But anyway, so we're good. All right. I'm going to take this and I'm going to set some pyramids up over here, and we're going to get this out of here, and then we're going to get a door because it's a little bit more difficult. So we'll be right back. All right, camera girl's back behind the camera for a little bit. This is her inspiration for what she wants. You see the white cabinets, and it may be hard to see, but they've got a glaze on them, which is, a glaze is simply like a darker gel stain or whatever. It gives a little dirty look, if you will. And then the same thing was done on the green cabinet. And this is, again, kind of her inspiration of kind of mixing the two. So that's what we've got, kind of what we're shooting for. And even though we're not doing a lot of distressing, this is kind of a French country type style. So that's kind of what we're doing. All right, when we get to this door, the first place to start painting is in here. Now, because we're doing a base coat, basically we're just putting the green on to have something to wear through the white too. You know, it's not important that we get in these grooves just perfect. But even when we get to them, there's a couple things you want. A small brush. You want something that will allow you to do the exact same thing, let you get in your corners nicely, and lay down a nice coat of paint. Now this again has been scuffed with that 320. But don't get a bunch of gobs and goops and all of them things on the outside or in your slots where your tins are going to go. So take it easy, light coats. It's far better to put 2 coats and do a mid-coat sanding in between. That makes for a super nice paint job. But I like to get the incidental stuff first, like around these corners and edges and whatever. You know, when we sanded this was only lightly sanded with some 120. We didn't have to do a lot of sanding. Now, for those of you who are interested, this is strictly for your information. As most of you know, we have an online woodworking show. And we're finishing up right now the secretary that you've seen in the background. And Crystal, if you want to, you can see the pigeonholes, and now we're down to just a few things in the finishing. Our next projects are going to be some tables, and we're going to be doing some old farm tables and whatever, where we're going to be, well, walking on gravel and hand planing and doing all that. Really makes for some fun furniture. And I'll tell you something else too about it. It sells extremely well. And we've been doing it for a number of years, and it's probably one of my favorite styles. We call it primitive, and but I will tell you this, because you're doing something in a primitive manner, meaning, you know, you're doing the old distressing and whatever, that's not an excuse for poor craftsmanship, so we're not going there. We got some big old pine in the back. We're gonna be taking some box store pine. And we're just gonna be able to create some really cool stuff. And you know, by doing what we're gonna be doing, I tell you what, woodworkers really like it because not only, like I said, not only does it look good, it sells good, it's really enjoyable to have and own, but it also eliminates a lot of frustration. And they're just fun to do because you can do them pretty quickly because you don't have all those little nitpicky things to have to worry about. Sanding's virtually non-existent. So if you're interested, it might be something you can check out that on our website. And I used to know the address of that, but come up here and tell them I can't remember all that. You're supposed to be painting and you ain't. That's right, you're supposed to be painting. I'll get her on here in a little bit and she can tell you what it is. Okay, you notice what I did on the outside is I ran around it and I just cleaned up my that perimeter, make sure I ain't got any major drips. Now when you're shellacking these things, I'm gonna give you a little hint. Everybody knows end grain can be a bear for fuzzing up and whatever, and you know, you put a water-based paint on it, man, it likes to go crazy. So when you're doing that shellac thing, hit them a couple times, seal them up. You'll be glad you did, trust me. And when you do that 320 sand, they're going to be smooth, just like you saw on the top. Now, even though we have shellac on this, there's a little bit of grain raising still going on. That's okay. Because, like I told you, we're going to do a mid-coat sand on this. Yeah, I could use the painter's pad here too. When you're doing something like a door, do it just like the grain. Do all your cross grain. Whoops, I don't want that. A little smaller one. Do your cross grain, then do your horizontal grain. Or vertical grain, whatever you want to call it. But thin coats. Thin coats, sanding in between the coats with a little bit of 320, that's the way you get a nice paint. Or like I said, you spray it. Spraying a heavy-based paint like a latex or something is a little difficult. Not too many. It's hard. If you're going to spray it, you're going to almost always have to thin it a little. I need to get some more paint, don't I? And if you're going to thin it, a lot of them will tell you not to, but you can. If you're going to thin it about 5–10%. All right. I'll get this on some pyramids and we'll do the other side. And what we're going to do now is we've got, in just a second, we'll walk you back here real quickly and let you see the pie safe, the actual pie safe. Because again, we're just getting a base coat that when we wear through the white, it's going to show. But we're also using this green to further seal this and give us a good, smooth finish. The smoother the finish is when we start doing the white, the better. All right, I'm gonna let that dry. So let's cut it down. We're gonna go take a look at the pie safe real quick. All right, here's the pie safe. Right now it's on its back. But again, we're just getting the outsides basically, because that's where we're going to be doing the wearing. And this is the drawer front. It's drying. I sprayed this. And again, I realize most of you don't have the availability of doing that, but that's okay. You know, again, doing like we talked about with the brushing works just fine. But an important part is doing that mid coat, that sanding in between. You know, smoothing each coat and taking your time. Take a big old brush and get on there and slop it on there and expect it to come out nice. Don't. Now, what we're going to do, camera girl's telling me, come up here so you can tell them the website. Camera girl's telling me that we're going to cut it now.
Yeah, we have to cut for time.
And then I'll get all the green on. Then we'll come back and start another one with the white. And hopefully with the white, then we can get to the distressing part and pretty much kind of wrap up the finishing on it. Okay?
All right, two things. Charles has a video on YouTube about mid-coat sanding, so if you want to learn more about that, just look that up on YouTube. And his website is cn-woodworking.com. So CN is in Charles Neal, -woodworking.com.
Very good. Okay, we'll see you in the next YouTube.